Protesters gathered in central London today to voice opposition to China's plan for a large new embassy complex in the British capital. The demonstration, which moved through major landmarks including Piccadilly Circus, Trafalgar Square, Westminster, Downing Street and the Home Office, focused on concerns that the proposed facility could pose security risks and enable harassment of dissidents living in the United Kingdom. Beijing purchased the site, formerly the Royal Mint, in 2018 for an estimated $327 million. However, the British government has not yet granted permission for construction. The decision, initially expected this month, has been delayed several times. Officials recently postponed the latest deadline from December 10 to January 20, extending a years-long debate over the scale, purpose and implications of what critics call a super embassy. At Piccadilly Circus, a large crowd assembled with placards, banners and loudspeakers to express opposition to plans for the new compound. Wide shots from the scene show demonstrators filling the area as traffic and pedestrians moved around them. Medium and close-up views captured protesters holding signs against the project, including references to Hong Kong and concerns about Chinese espionage. One protester held a placard reading "Mourning for Hong Kong, Labour Party lies, Chinese espionage." Another group carried a banner stating "Stop betraying Hong Kongers." Demonstrators gathered around speakers addressing the crowd as the march prepared to move south toward Westminster. Participants included long-term Hong Kong activists, British supporters of the movement, and individuals who said they feared the proposed embassy could facilitate surveillance or intimidation of dissidents. Protest organisers say their goal is to urge the UK government to deny the embassy planning application on national security grounds. Among those speaking publicly was KK, a 61-year-old doctor of Hong Kong origin who now lives in the UK. In his remarks to the crowd, KK said he believed the new site could serve purposes beyond traditional diplomatic functions. As he put it, "And we fear that the new embassy in London will become a centre of espionage, but also a centre of illegal arrests for Hong Kongers like me who have participated in anti-Chinese demonstrations and protests in the past and continue to do so today." The same applies to Hong Kongers who have fled to Britain seeking refuge since the 2019 protests and the subsequent crackdown. KK added that previous incidents have heightened concerns among activists. In a second statement, he said, "We know that some of us have been harassed in Manchester by the consulate." And a few years later, there was an incident in which consulate staff in Manchester tried to grab demonstrators, bring them onto the consulate grounds and beat them up. So we know that oppression really exists. After the initial gathering, protesters marched toward Trafalgar Square carrying banners and chanting. Footage shows large groups moving past the National Gallery, repeating the slogan, "China is a threat, not our friend." The demonstration continued along Whitehall toward Westminster. At Westminster, protesters chanted, "Keir Starmer, don't be a traitor," as the Houses of Parliament appeared in the background. Other groups chanted "No" to the Chinese mega embassy, repeating the message several times as the march advanced toward Downing Street. Close-up footage captured individuals holding signs as the group continued chanting. Flags representing Hong Kong's protest movement were visible throughout the crowd. Demonstrators periodically stopped to regroup, raise banners and repeat slogans directed at government officials. As the march arrived at Downing Street, participants held a series of short speeches aimed at drawing attention to what they described as risks posed by allowing a large diplomatic compound controlled by the Chinese government so close to central government institutions. Protesters remained in the area for several minutes before moving toward the Home Office. Outside the Home Office, the demonstration gathered for its final segment. Wide shots show participants filling the space in front of the building's entrance. Protesters held signs, listened to speakers and repeated earlier chants. One speaker was Alison Siuch, a retired UK resident who addressed the crowd with concerns about broader security implications. In her remarks, she said she feared that British society at large could be affected by the operations of a new Chinese diplomatic compound. As she stated, "I'm worried about the whole of the UK in a certain way. She then added, "I worry about the whole UK in a sense, because the Chinese government is doing everything to infiltrate everyone, including Hong Kongers or anyone from mainland China or anyone else. They just spy on everyone." Another speaker, Alan Dai, that Win Code, who works for a Member of Parliament and is originally from Hong Kong, used his address to appeal for stronger government measures to protect Hong Kongers now living in Britain. Referring to his own background, he said, "As a Hong Konger, I wish that the UK government would protect us. I was born under the British Union Jack flag, so I am as British as any other British citizen." In a second statement, Dai responded to questions about whether refusing permission for the embassy could negatively impact UK-China relations. He argued that diplomatic tensions between the two countries were influenced by many factors that extend beyond the issue of embassy construction. As he put it, "I think that regardless of whether the embassy is built or not, there will be many other factors, including the international and geopolitical situation, that will damage those relations anyway." So I think that right now we need to focus on the UK's national security. The protest continued outside the Home Office for several minutes, with speakers addressing the crowd about the historical context of Hong Kong's political freedoms, the 2019 protests, and China's national security law. Demonstrators held signs referencing political prisoners, the Sino-British Joint Declaration, and calls for greater protections for asylum seekers who fled Hong Kong. Throughout the march, participants emphasised concerns that a large embassy compound could enable more extensive activities by Chinese authorities, including surveillance of political dissidents, intimidation of activists, and potential interference in domestic political debates. Several speakers highlighted past incidents in the UK involving diplomatic personnel and protesters, citing them as evidence that stricter oversight of foreign diplomatic facilities is necessary. The pending decision on the embassy planning application remains central to the ongoing debate. London authorities have cited security, design and local planning considerations while weighing approval of the project. Critics argue that the scale of the proposed complex, described as a super embassy, raises questions about its intended functions. Supporters say diplomatic representation is an established international practice and that any major embassy will require substantial space. The government has not provided details on its timeline or criteria for making a final decision. Protesters who marched today say they will continue urging ministers and local authorities to reject the application. They argue that granting permission would be inconsistent with Britain's legal obligations to protect refugees and dissidents who fled Hong Kong after the implementation of China's national security law. Many demonstrators emphasise that Hong Kongers with British national overseas visas rely on the UK to ensure that political freedoms and safety are upheld. The march concluded with demonstrators gathering outside the Home Office, repeating chants and holding placards toward the building's entrance. Speakers thanked participants for attending and called for continued public pressure ahead of the January 20 deadline. Organisers also stated that they plan to submit additional petitions and letters to government departments in the coming weeks. Police monitored the march throughout the day. No major incidents were reported. Traffic continued operating through nearby roads as officers guided crowds along planned routes. The demonstration represents the latest public action by Hong Kong advocacy groups in Britain, who have organised numerous protests since 2019 in response to developments in Hong Kong and to express concerns about China's political reach abroad. Today's march focused specifically on preventing the construction of the new embassy, which critics believe could expand China's operational capacity in the UK at a time when questions about foreign interference and national security remain prominent. With the decision still pending and the deadline extended, the status of the proposed embassy continues to draw political attention and public scrutiny. Hong Kong advocacy organisations say they expect the debate to intensify as the January 20 date approaches. The situation now rests with UK authorities as they review the application and determine whether the construction of China's proposed super embassy can proceed. The British government has not yet approved the project, and the decision remains under review.